Every disappearance has a moment, a point in time where choices are made, quietly, deliberately, and everything changes. For Malehya, that moment didn't happen in a courtroom or during a heated argument. It happened in the silence between the whispers, when she decided there was no one left she could trust. People say she ran because she was reckless. Others insist she was desperate. But the truth may be far more unsettling, that Malehya didn't vanish in fear. She vanished with a plan. We don't know exactly when she decided to take the children and disappear, but we do know what was closing in on her. The strained visits with Child Protective Services, the growing suspicion from neighbors, the letters she never mailed, the calls she stopped answering, the warnings she gave, disguised as casual remarks, to people who didn't understand what she was really saying. Tonight, we will trace her steps in those final weeks, piece together the tension that built, the signs everyone missed, and the possible reasons why she decided that disappearing with her children was the only option left. Because when you look closely, this isn't just the story of a mother who vanished. It's the story of someone who may have believed she was saving her children or ensuring they were never found. But before we dive into this, kindly subscribe to our channel if you believe in fighting for justice. We've just crossed 3,000 subscribers, all because of your support, and we need that same energy to reach 4,000, then 5,000, and then 10,000. So go ahead and drop your fingerprints on that subscribe button and where you're watching from, because wherever you are, the day this vision is fulfilled, I will send my appreciation straight to you. Let's keep building this community that fights for justice together. She didn't vanish into the night without a reason. Malehya Brooks Murray. To most, she was a complicated figure. To Lily and Jack, she was simply Mom, a woman who had carried them through early years of struggle, who kept the outside world at arm's length, and who, for reasons that would become the subject of speculation, never seemed to fully trust the people closest to her. Lily, just 6 years old. Jack, barely 4. Two children known for their bright eyes and boundless energy. Children who, by every account, loved their mother, even when the circumstances around them grew darker. Before we proceed, please hold on for a moment. Detective Max is not here to waste another moment. He's here for one reason: justice. The focus is, and will always be, the children. Every step, every question, every piece of evidence is about uncovering the truth and bringing it into the light. If you have information, observations, or even a theory, drop it in the comments. Keep it factual. Keep it constructive. No slander, only words that can move this case forward. And remember, every single word you hear in this space, even if you've heard it before, is here for a reason. Every detail is under analysis, because somewhere in these facts lies the key we've been searching for. In the months leading to their disappearance, Malehya's world was shrinking. The visits from social workers became more frequent. Questions from friends became harder to dodge. Rumors circulated in whispers, each one carrying its own sting. Her calls to certain family members stopped entirely. Her public appearances grew rare. Some say the pressure was building, that each day brought her closer to a point of no return. Others believe she was already planning her exit, testing the boundaries, preparing the children for a day they wouldn't understand until much later. Today we'll follow that pressure, from the first cracks in her social circle to the moment everything snapped. Because if Malehya disappeared with her children, it wasn't impulsive. It was the end result of months of fear, isolation, and a breaking point she could no longer ignore. Inside the small home she shared with Daniel Martel, life was anything but stable. What began as quiet disagreements grew into arguments sharp enough to pierce through the thin walls, loud enough for neighbors to pause, to listen, to remember. Some nights, the shouting would come in waves, followed by long stretches of silence, broken only by the sound of a door slamming or hurried footsteps across the floor. A few neighbors would later recall seeing Lily and Jack sitting on the front steps during those moments, small figures in the fading light, waiting for the tension inside to break. Daniel's presence seemed to weigh heavier on the house with each passing month. What started as his occasional bad mood became a constant shadow. Malehya's once animated voice grew quieter, her smile more reserved. She began keeping the curtains drawn, even in the middle of the day. And then came the locks. Not just the front door, bedroom doors, the back gate, a latch on the kitchen window. Friends noticed she stopped answering calls from certain people, especially those who asked too many questions. Playdates for the kids became rare. Visitors were greeted at the door but rarely invited inside. It was as if she was building a fortress, not just to keep something out, but to keep the truth in. This wasn't simply a troubled household. It was a pressure cooker, and the heat was rising. In the days leading up to their disappearance, the tension in that house reached a breaking point. There were reports, quiet, second-hand whispers, of one argument that lasted for hours. Voices raised, things breaking, a child crying. A neighbor claimed she saw Malehya standing outside afterward, her hands trembling as she lit a cigarette, staring at the ground as if trying to find answers in the cracks of the pavement. That week, Daniel's temper seemed sharper, his patience thinner. He was said to be making new demands about where Malehya could go, who she could speak to. Even the children weren't spared from the oppressive atmosphere. Jack became withdrawn. Lily clung closer to her mother, but perhaps the most telling sign was Malehya's behavior in those last 48 hours. She withdrew entirely. No school drop-offs, no visits to the corner store, no calls returned. For those who tried to reach her, the phone would ring and ring, then stop. A close friend would later claim that during their last conversation, Malehya's voice was low, shaky, and certain. She said one thing that still haunts her: "If I don't leave now, we won't survive this." Whatever happened next wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate, planned. The quiet end to months of private fear, and the start of a mystery that still hasn't been solved. In the months before she vanished, Malehya's life appeared to shrink, but not in the chaotic way that comes from bad luck or disorganization. It was deliberate, measured, almost as if every move had been rehearsed in her mind long before it happened. The first sign came quietly. Without notice, she pulled Lily and Jack out of their after-school programs. To the staff, she smiled, saying she just needed to rearrange her schedule. No explanation, no future date for their return. From that day on, the children's movements became limited. School, home, and nowhere else. The playdates stopped. The familiar sight of them walking home with other children vanished. Around the same time, small amounts of money began disappearing from her bank account. Not hundreds at once, that would be too noticeable. Instead, it was little withdrawals, 40 here, 60 there, always in cash, always from different ATMs across town. On paper it looked harmless, but over weeks, the total quietly grew into something significant. Money that could fit in an envelope, tucked into a bag, ready for travel without a digital trace. Then her phone habits changed. Friends began to notice she was harder to reach. Sometimes calls rang unanswered for hours. Messages would sit as delivered, but never read. It wasn't just avoidance, it was detachment. Later, investigators would learn she had disposed of her main phone entirely. No carrier records, no data trail. In its place, she carried a second-hand device, bought in cash from a man who sold electronics out of the trunk of his car. No contract, no ID required. Piece by piece, she was erasing her digital footprint. The old life, the one people could follow, question and control, was being dismantled. At the time, no one saw the full picture. To friends, it was stress. To neighbors, maybe a rough patch in her relationship. But with hindsight, it's clear, Malehya wasn't spiraling. She was preparing. And every small, careful step brought her closer to the day she would take her children and vanish into the unknown. For months, Malehya's retreat from the world had been gradual, like a shadow lengthening at dusk. But every shadow has its breaking point. The moment when the last bit of light disappears. That moment came on a cold, wind-stung night in late March. The details remain murky, but according to one neighbor, raised voices were heard inside her home. Not the muffled sound of an argument, but sharp, clipped words that carried through the walls. A man's voice. Then a door slammed so hard the sound seemed to crack the stillness of the street. Hours later, a clerk at a 24-hour gas station, just off Highway 11, would remember a woman pulling in alone. The security camera showed her, head down, hair disheveled, hands trembling as she tried to unscrew a bottle of water. The clerk says she was crying. Not loud, not hysterical, but the kind of silent, shaking tears that come from something you can't easily explain. When he asked if she was okay, she didn't answer. She just paid for gas, slid a crumpled bill across the counter, and drove away into the dark. In the days that followed, the change was visible to those paying close attention. Lily and Jack were seen at a local supermarket with their mother. But they weren't the smiling, chatty kids the community was used to. They stayed close to her side, glancing at each other in a way that seemed unspoken, like they both knew something they couldn't share. One cashier would later describe them as anxious, like they were waiting for something to happen. She remembered Jack holding tightly onto a packet of crackers, even as his mother paid for the rest of the groceries. She didn't take it from him. She didn't speak to him at all. Looking back, these moments would read like warning signs, but at the time, they were just fragments of ordinary life, brushed aside by the rush of daily routine. And then days later, they were gone. Malehya's silence in public was deceiving. In private, she was a woman unraveling, or a woman who had seen enough to know the danger was real. According to one close friend, one of the last people she still trusted, there was a night, just 2 weeks before Lily and Jack vanished, that stuck in her mind like a splinter. They were parked outside a small grocery store, after closing time, their breath fogging up the cold glass, when Malehya broke the silence. She didn't look at her friend when she spoke. She just stared straight ahead and said, "If we stay here, something bad will happen." Her tone wasn't dramatic. It wasn't panicked. It was flat, cold, and certain. She didn't explain who or what she feared. She didn't have to. The look in her eyes made it clear that this wasn't just a vague feeling. It was a warning she had already convinced herself was true. In the days that followed, fragments of her private world began to emerge. Among her belongings were scraps of notebook paper with hurried, unfinished sentences. "Don't answer the door if, we have to be careful at the bridge. He's been here again." Investigators also found messages on her phone that hinted at paranoia, or perhaps proof that someone really was watching her. One text to an unlisted number read, "You saw him again, didn't you?" There was no reply. Another simply said, "We can't stay here, not safe." Neighbors would later recall little things. Malehya pulling her curtains shut earlier and earlier each day. The children no longer riding their bikes past the corner store. A morning when she walked to the community mailbox, saw the door slightly ajar, and turned around without touching it. One resident swore she muttered something about it being messed with before leaving. These were not the actions of a woman living without fear. These were the behaviors of someone who believed every movement was being observed, every decision monitored. And when a person truly believes they're being watched, every trip to the store feels like a mission, every neighbor could be an informant, and every moment with your children could be the last safe one you have. By the time Malia made her choice, the walls around her weren't just metaphorical, they were real. Locked doors, drawn curtains, a phone that rang less and less because she'd stopped answering. But beneath the stillness was movement. Quiet, deliberate movement. She began studying maps, not the kind you'd spread out on a table, but routes etched into her mind. The less traveled county roads, the logging tracks that connected back to main highways, if you knew where to turn. Paths she'd once taken on family drives, now reconsidered as escape routes. She knew the dangers of being spotted. So the plan, if you could call it that, involved avoiding the obvious. No brightly lit gas stations, no rest stops with cameras in every corner, no toll roads, where license plates are automatically scanned. Every mile would need to be invisible. Friends recall she asked strange, guarded questions. Which back roads don't get salted in winter? Does that gas station near the river have cameras outside or just inside? She was collecting pieces of a puzzle no one else knew existed. But perhaps the bigger question isn't how she planned to go. It's why she never sought help from the very institutions built to protect families. Her distrust was bone deep. In her mind, CPS didn't save children. They relocated them, often back into the environments that caused harm in the first place. Law enforcement, she believed their reports got filed away until it was too late, and the thought of an official intervention didn't bring comfort. It brought terror. She was convinced that once those systems stepped in, her children would no longer be hers to protect. She didn't trust that anyone else could see the danger she saw. So instead of paperwork, there would be preparation. Instead of knocking on an office door, there would be silent packing in the middle of the night. The plan was fragile, desperate, and irreversible. To an outsider, it would soon look like an abduction. To Malaya, it was something else entirely, a rescue mission. It was just after midnight when the first step of the plan became reality. The kind of night where the cold doesn't sting, it seeps, air heavy with damp, the kind that clings to clothes and hair, and makes every sound travel farther than it should. No lights on in the house, except the faint orange glow from the kitchen where the last bag was being zipped shut. Inside that bag, not toys, not keepsakes, but survival. Canned food, a roll of bills wrapped in elastic, 2 pairs of the children's warmest clothes, toothbrushes, a small first aid kit, and something else, an old worn blanket the children had shared since toddlerhood. Not practical, but essential. By 12:37 a.m., the front door closed without a slam, just a click. A neighbor, the last confirmed sighting, noticed a shape in the driveway, crouched low, lifting one of the children into the back seat. They didn't wave, they didn't linger. They just eased the door shut and glanced down the street before sliding behind the wheel. The vehicle didn't head for the main road. That was deliberate. Malaya knew which streets had aging lampposts that left whole stretches in shadow. She took those. Her first turn put her on a farm road that curved parallel to the highway, but avoided its eyes. No patrols, no toll cameras, no curious travelers stopping for coffee. Every route was chosen to leave the fewest electronic footprints possible. Toll booths meant digital records. Highway exits meant potential surveillance. Even larger bridges, with their embedded traffic cams, were to be avoided. She'd mapped out detours that looped miles around them. For the next hour, her world would be reduced to 2 things: the soft, steady breathing of the children in the back seat, and the beam of headlights cutting through a road that seemed to belong to her alone. To the rest of the world, nothing was happening. To Malaya, it was already too late to turn back. In the weeks that followed, the search fanned out like a widening ripple in dark water. But the thing about ripples, they fade. Investigators, journalists, and online sleuths began building their own maps, not of where Malaya was last seen, but of where she could disappear to. Some pointed to remote relatives, family members who lived far from the public eye, people who owed Malaya favors, or shared her mistrust of outside authority. A cousin in the northern woods who didn't use a smartphone. An aunt with a cabin so deep in the pines that even cell signals died before reaching the driveway. Others believed she had slipped into the embrace of off-grid communities, clusters of people who traded connection for isolation, where a new face could blend in so long as they pulled their weight and asked no questions. There were whispers of a desert encampment, a cluster of RVs parked miles from the nearest paved road, where outsiders never lingered. Another theory, the calculated creation of a fake identity. All it takes is one birth certificate bought under the table, a driver's license renewed in a name that isn't yours. With cash, determination, and the right contacts, she could become someone else entirely. A new name on the lease of a small apartment in a town that doesn't check backgrounds too closely. But there's a reason some believe she never touched a major city. Cities mean cameras, in banks, in subways, outside every corner store. They mean witnesses, random encounters, places where her face could be caught and compared against the posters plastered in post offices and gas stations across the country. If she was running to survive, to truly disappear, the safest places were not where millions of strangers pass each other every day. The safest places were the blank spaces on the map. Somewhere out there, beyond the reach of streetlights and news vans, Malaya, Jack, and Lily could have been living their lives in the shadows, seen only by the trees, the wind, and those who had every reason to keep their secret. The public couldn't agree on who Malaya really was in those final days before she vanished. To some, she was a heroic mother, a woman who had seen the system fail her children one too many times, and who took the only option left to pull them out of reach before something worse could happen. Supporters pointed to her fierce distrust of certain local authorities, to the whispered accounts of visits from child welfare workers that ended with nothing changing. They noted the injuries, like the black eye on Jack that was brushed off as an accident, and argued that any mother who loved her children would do whatever it took to keep them safe, even if it meant disappearing. But to others, she was the prime suspect in their suffering. They saw her silence as calculated. They recalled her coldness in interviews, her selective memory when pressed for details. They pointed out how she distanced herself from neighbors in the weeks before leaving, and how she seemed to avoid any situation that would require her children to be seen by a doctor or teacher. The evidence seemed to cut both ways. Her sudden departure could be read as a desperate rescue mission, or as the cover-up of something she didn't want exposed. The missing digital trail, the lack of confirmed sightings, the possible use of cash-only transactions. Each fact sat like a coin on the table, and depending on how you turned it, it showed a different face. Experts in criminal psychology have a term for cases like this: protective disappearances. In some, the motive is exactly what the name implies: shielding children from a perceived threat. But those same experts warn that the protective instinct can also be twisted, masking neglect, abuse, or desperation that spiraled into something irreversible. In Malehya's case, the line between protection and concealment was so thin it was almost invisible. And as days turned into months, every absence of proof became its own kind of evidence, not of what she had done, but of what she might be capable of. If she's out there, Malehya walking with Lily and Jack at her side, she is living inside 1,000 small fears. Every knock at the door is a possible ending. Every face in a crowd could be the one who recognizes her. Every sudden siren could be the sound of the world closing in. That is what disappearance does to a person. It gives them the thing they wanted most, distance, and takes from them the thing they will never get back: a life lived openly, without the ache of hiding. But there is another side to that same silence. For those who loved Lily and Jack before a map of their faces plastered mailboxes and telephone poles, the not knowing is a slow, corrosive grief. It grows teeth. It learns how to ask the same question at every dinner table, at every vigil, in every news clip. Why did she go? Was it an act of rescue, a frantic, heartbreaking attempt by a mother to pull her children away from harm she believed authorities could not see? Or was it something darker, a disappearance that doubles as a cover, a way to bury a truth so ugly it could never survive a courtroom? Both answers live in the same neighborhood of possibility. Both can be true to someone's memory. Both demand we treat what follows with care and urgency. If she is innocent, if she fled because the system failed her, then the only path to justice is for her to come forward, to tell the story in full, to let investigators test the facts, to let the people who love Lily and Jack find them and heal in whatever way they can. If she is guilty, and that is a truth only a careful investigation can determine, then the only path to justice is the same truth: evidence, accountability. The law is not merely a punishment. It is a way for communities to know what happened, for families to place blame where it belongs, and for children's names not to be swallowed by rumor. We have spent 30 minutes tracing the tracks she left. Deliberate choices, small cash withdrawals, a second-hand phone, a route designed to vanish. We have listened to neighbors, to friends, to the quiet scraps of paper that kept a terrified voice alive long enough to be read. We have done this not to convict a woman in public, but to hold up the hard, messy questions, until someone gives us the answers we deserve. So here is what we ask of you now. If you know something, anything, do not let silence be another hiding place. If you believe the truth could protect a child, help a grieving grandmother, or clear an accused name, speak up. Reach out to local authorities. Call the tip line. Share what you remember, no matter how small it feels. And if you are the one carrying the knowledge that could end this uncertainty, if you are the person who knows where Malehya and the children are, or who knows what happened that night, listen closely. Coming forward does not erase the past, but it can stop the silence from writing the rest of the story. Was it survival, or something darker? Until someone tells us, that question will sit heavy in this town, and in all of us who have watched, waited, and kept the light burning. Speak now. Not for headlines, not for judgment, for Lily, for Jack, for the truth.